What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm trying something a little bit different today, and I'm going live. And you might notice the Rumble watermark in the corner there. Sorry about that. But I'm trying out Rumble Studio for the first time, and I'm also streaming live on X and YouTube as well. So if you're joining me here on Rumble, normally I try to update my YouTube channel just because that's really my main focus. But Rumble is a pretty cool platform, and it's not a bad idea to have a backup place to go in case the censorship starts to work overtime, like we saw in 2020. And I wanted to start doing live streams more often, and I think Sunday night is a pretty good time to do them. So I'm aiming to go live every Sunday at 10 p.m. Eastern, and that's 9 p.m. Central, and 11 p.m. on the East Coast of Canada. So going forward, I want to be going live every Sunday night, so I hope you'll join me. Now, if you're new here, normally I try to do 1, 2, maybe 3 videos per week in my spare time covering the insanity that is Canadian politics right now. And I haven't even addressed the Iran war yet. Everything going on in the news has just been so crazy. It's hard to keep up because I don't work on this channel full time, but it's something that I very much enjoy doing. And oftentimes I'll go to start a topic, and by the time I sit down at my desk, somebody else has already covered it, or something else crazy deserves my attention. So going forward, I want to start doing this every Sunday night here on X, YouTube, and Rumble. So if you're down with that, make sure you're following me and you subscribe. All right. So let's get into some stuff here tonight. Like I said, I have yet to address the Iran war, which is pretty much all everybody's talking about these days, and with good reason. I think the entire thing has turned out to be a complete, unmitigated disaster. It was an absolute mistake, and the United States absolutely should not have done this. And I'm starting to think that Donald Trump really should have listened to, well, himself. So let's take a look at this now, shall we? Honestly, guys, what happened to this guy? I want to know. Donald Trump, in order to get elected, Barack Obama will start a war with Iran. And that was in 2011. And then again in 2017, Barack Obama, 2012, my bad. Barack Obama will attack Iran in order to get reelected. I predict that President Obama will at some point attack Iran in order to save face. And that was in 2013. And again, remember that I predicted a long time ago that President Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly, not skilled. Man, what happened to this guy? Seriously, that's what I want to know. That's what a lot of people want to know. But apparently you have Trump derangement syndrome if you question this, which is just absolutely bananas. So I want to pull up another one here. Let's see here. Bear with me, guys. I'm new to this. All right. What will we get for bombing Syria besides more debt and a possible long-term conflict? Obama needs congressional approval. And now we're in a situation where Donald Trump scoffs at the idea of congressional approval for the war that he started, which is proving to be very, very unpopular. Now, I want to pull up another one here. We just have example after example of this stuff, guys. And that's the one we just looked at. Again, I apologize. Kind of new at this, but we'll find our rhythm here eventually. There we go. The United States has spent $8 trillion fighting and policing the Middle East. Thousands of our great soldiers have died or have been badly wounded. Millions of people have died on the other side. Going into the Middle East was the worst decision ever made. Yeah, I'm starting to think he really should have. He really should be listening to that guy. And let's see. Richard on YouTube says, "War disaster. You're a moron." Okay, Richard. Well, that's your opinion. If you're still with me here in the chat, though, do you want to just enlighten me? What is the benefit for America here in this? I'm just, I'll wait for your response there, but then we're going to move on here. So this is where we're at today. Trump warns NATO, presses China to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, because this obviously, like I said, is not going well. Donald Trump has declared victory in this thing at least 7 times already. 7 times he's come out and said the war is basically over. And apparently Iran is getting completely decimated. Their nuclear program has been obliterated, yet they needed to do this to obliterate the nuclear program, which had apparently already been obliterated in the 12-day war. And now we're supposed to believe that it's going well, and yet they can't even secure the Strait of Hormuz. So US President Donald Trump warned NATO of a very bad future if allies do not help open up the Strait of Hormuz, and said he may also delay a planned summit with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, in comments published by the Financial Times here on Sunday. I think China should help too, because China gets 90% of its oil from the Straits, Trump told the newspaper, adding he would prefer to know Beijing's position before the planned visit. We may delay, he said of the trip. Yeah, no shit. He's literally at war with one of their main oil suppliers. U.S. Treasury Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier wrapped up the first of 2 days of talks in Paris on Sunday to iron out kinks in their trade truce and clear a path for Trump's trip to Beijing to meet with Xi at the end of March. Okay, guys, so again, we're led to believe that the war is going well, and yet nothing is going through the Strait of Hormuz. Oil prices are skyrocketing, and this after the pro-war shills all over the internet were taking a victory lap after oil dropped one day. Trump campaigned on this stuff, guys. Trump was supposed to make life more affordable for Americans, and all of a sudden we're led to believe that, well, this is short-term pain for long-term gain. And this
disruption
exactly
for the long term
about Trump's presidency. The entire thing at this point to me seems like a psyop. Now, I've lived through a bunch of psyops in my time, okay? We've all seen them. We all lived through the COVID insanity. We all collectively lost our minds watching the left celebrate lockdowns, champion vaccine and mask mandates, and all of it was built on shaky science that anybody who was paying attention could see through, right? And yet, I honestly believe that Donald Trump's presidency is an even greater psyop than that, because he managed to convince people that were awake to all of this stuff that he was going to be the answer to all this. He was going to drain the swamp. And that's what a lot of people were hoping for. And I just don't see any path forward for him to succeed in the midterm elections, like at all. For real, guys, like the people that voted for Donald Trump 3 times, that oftentimes cross the floor from the Democrats, there are literally people that voted for Obama twice that supported Donald Trump 3 times because they believed all that stuff that I showed you in the start of the stream. But how I liken this to COVID-19 is you can see the programming on TV. We all saw those news montages where reporters were saying safe and effective, 14 days to flatten the curve. And I guess the new firmware update is in because we have this. Try to blow it up bigger for you guys to see.
This is a short-term disruption for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term pain be for long-term gain.
We're going to have some short-term pain with long-term gain.
Short-term pay for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain, yes, but we've got some long-term gain. Short-term spike for a long-term gain.
Some short-term pain for American consumers.
We may have to deal with that in the short term.
Short-term and temporary.
Temporary short-term pain.
It's going to suck in the short term.
Some short-term pain.
Short-term pain. We have to focus on the short-term.
Short-term.
Short-term. Short-term. Short-term and long-term.
Short-term blip.
Hopefully this is a short-term pain.
Short-term
is highly outweighed of the long-term benefits.
Some short-term pain for the long-term gain.
Short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
This is a short-term
All right. So every time you see the news just completely in lockstep like that, you know that you're being dealt a narrative that was handed down from the top. Now, hold on. We got something else in the chat here. Okay, so Richard says the dollar maintains reserve currency. Also, Trump now controls all of the oil that China needs. But he doesn't, though, right? That's exactly my point. He really doesn't at this point in time. I don't know if you noticed, but the regime is still standing. They can't even get oil through the Strait of Hormuz. This thing isn't over yet. Donald Trump is literally asking NATO for help. Richard says, why don't you comment on the third world country that Canada has now become? Absolutely. 100%, dude. I'm with you there, okay? But two things can be true at the same time. All right? Now, I don't know if you're new here, probably, but like I have a whole YouTube channel where I talk about this stuff. I barely ever get into American politics, but this one I can't ignore because this thing is going to hurt regular people. This thing is going to drive up the price of gas. It's going to get people all across the world killed. We've already seen how Iran can actually touch U.S. interests in the Middle East. And I just don't think it was well thought out. I don't think it's a good idea. And I think it's a complete and total betrayal of what Donald Trump voted for. So that's why I'm on a little bit of a rant about this, Richard. And, we can respectfully disagree, but I actually am going to comment on the third world country that Canada has become. That's a really good idea. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, did you support Charlie Kirk at all? Were you horrified and devastated when he got shot in the neck? Because I certainly was. I think that was really sad. America lost a great voice, but looking back on it, I'm starting to wonder if Charlie Kirk would have been very inconvenient at a time like this
about Israel and Iran
for the establishment, because there are some people online that are saying that Charlie Kirk was, for regime change in Iran. He very much, I'll grant you that he did speak out against Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Nobody wants to see that, obviously. But I'm about to demonstrate here in this series of videos that Charlie Kirk would have agreed with me on this. And I know a lot of the pro-war people are still mourning him, but I really think that he would have been a formidable voice in this conversation today.
Iran and potentially the United States. On one side is the Lindsey Graham, John Bolton types, where they are actively calling for regime change. Here is Lindsey Graham. This is just lunacy. This kind of analysis is not helpful. This kind of approach, this kind of argument, it has nothing to do with nuclear weapons at this point. This is now that we want to go all in and take out the regime. It's time for us to close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen and start a new chapter in the Middle East. And that sounds good, doesn't it? But what have we learned when it comes to wars, and especially wars in the Middle East? What you draw up on a whiteboard rarely happens. What you think theoretically is going to occur, there might be unintended and unforeseen consequences, especially when you're talking about a country 2.5 times the size of Texas.
I'm just going to pause it right there because Charlie's on a roll from beyond the grave. We are already starting to see the unintended and unexpected consequences. And Richard says, I'm highly brainwashed. Okay. All right, dude. Stick around, though. We will get into some Canadian stuff, I promise.
It has 90 million people and was an ancient and great power with well over a dozen ethnic groups. You have underground Christians. You don't really have many Jews left in Persia. But also you have secular younger Persians. Who's going to run the country exactly, Lindsey Graham? This sounds like Hillary Rodham Clinton in Libya. So I'm pointing to the first extreme right now, the neoconservative extreme. We must go take off the head of the snake right now. Play cut 285.
Be all in, President Trump, in helping Israel eliminate the nuclear threat. If we need to provide.
And I'm glad he brought up Hillary Clinton because honestly, if anybody hasn't seen it, I should pull this clip up after I put up this video. I don't have it queued. But did anybody else see that this week, Hillary Clinton came out and said she was optimistic about Trump's second term? All right. So I just want to highlight how insane that is. Okay. Because Donald Trump, as we all know, back in 2015, when he was talking about draining the swamp, when he, on the primary stage, looked Jeb Bush dead in the eye and said, "Your brother lied us into a war." That's the Donald Trump that a lot of people, myself included, by the way, were rooting for. And when he was championing lock her up, all of a sudden, Hillary Clinton, who, for all we've come to believe, absolutely despises Donald Trump, all of a sudden she is on board with his second term. She's optimistic about it because Donald Trump is giving Hillary Clinton and the other neocons the war that they have wanted for 30 years, easily. And Israel has wanted it even longer than that.
Provide bombs to Israel, provide bombs if we need to fly planes with Israel, do joint operations. But here's the bigger question. Wouldn't the world be better off if the Ayatollahs went away and replaced by something better? Wouldn't Iran be better off? It's time to...
All right, I'm going to pause it here because you know what? The cool thing about having a small audience is I can sort of riff with the chat. And Richard, you started off by calling me a moron, but like you're still here, so that's cool. We can have a respectful conversation. You can chime in if you want, because I actually agree with what you say here, man. You say this has little to do with Iran or Venezuela. It's all about China. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. But like, we seem to be marching towards a hot war with a nuclear superpower. I mean, you have a proxy war, essentially a proxy war going on between the United States, NATO, and Russia through Ukraine. And now we want to start another proxy war. So I don't know, man, just poking the bear and starting an actual marching us towards an actual conflict with China isn't exactly the world I want to leave for my children, man, respectfully. But like, I agree with your take. I think you're absolutely right. This absolutely is what this is about.
Close the chapter on the Iranian Ayatollah and his henchmen. Let's close that chapter soon and start a new chapter in the Mideast, one of tolerance, hope, and peace.
Okay, that sounds good, but that's pathologically insane. I'm sorry, it is. How do you know it's going to be better? Yeah, the Ayatollah is awful, but maybe he's one of the few guys that can keep that country together and not have a 90 million person civil war. Lindsey Graham is so consistently out of his mind, it's hard to even comprehend. Iran is hugely diverse. It is a massive country. Do the people agitating for war even know that? Because be clear, regime change is war. Just to understand, regime change is not like changing the head coach at the Chicago Bears. It's not how it works. It's not like...
And can you imagine if what Charlie Kirk there said is hilarious? I would love to know what his take would be on the Venezuela situation, because what he just said there is exactly what they've done with Venezuela. And, you know, that one hasn't turned out as disastrous as Iran yet, but we'll see.
Like a clean transfer. Typically in the Mideast, it's very messy, creates a quagmire, and then there is civil war. Do you understand how large Iran is? It's massive. It's a very big country. It's mountainous. It makes Afghanistan and Iraq look like a cakewalk. Just look at this beast of a country with all the different regions, all the different dialects, if we could put that up on screen. And then you have a major refugee concern of Mohammedans that will come to Europe and endanger more Christians and Jews, and Mohammedans that will come to America. No, that is wrong. So that is one extreme. The other extreme is one that I have deep respect and reverence for, because I actually think if we had that other extreme, we would not have invaded Iraq. This other extreme is philosophically important. It's important to consider, and that's the Ron Paul extreme. And I love Ron Paul. Ron Paul is awesome. I would have Ron Paul on the show regularly. He is a hero because Ron Paul had the courage to challenge old sacred cows of the Republican Party. He made people defend the indefensible. But the Ron Paul perspective is strictly isolationist. I actually agree with a lot of this other extreme. A lot. I think it's healthy to have this other extreme more than the neoconservative extreme, because this extreme has been underrepresented in the public dialogue and discourse the last 20 years. So you have these two extremes. I honestly don't think the neoconservative extreme needs to be represented philosophically anymore. It's uninteresting to me. They've done a mess of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, the entire Middle East, Ukraine. We know what the neoconservatives believe. I do.
Now, Richard, you do have a point there. Canadians have the luxury of being weak and childish. You live under the umbrella of the American military. Very true. But we also live under the umbrella of the NATO alliance as well. And, well, good luck getting NATO to help you with your war, man. Because, like, all we've seen for the last few months is Donald Trump putting tariffs on all these countries, belittling them at every turn, and now he's openly asking the rest of NATO for help. Which, don't get me wrong, we if this thing turns out into the quagmire that I'm predicting that's going to, we might be obligated to just for global security. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. I just don't think that American soldiers, Canadian soldiers, or Europeans should have to go to die for this war of choice. Sorry, man, that's just my opinion.
I think hearing out, and honestly, I agree with a lot of the more, I think isolationist is used as a pejorative, but let's just say restrained community. Take out the Ayatollah. Resist that temptation. That's not prudence. That's not self-control. That's something else talking. That's a zeal. And that very same zeal got us involved in a pile of garbage in Iraq. It all felt good with shock and awe in March of 2003. We're unstoppable. We're going to take Iraq in a weekend. Turns out, it didn't work that way. A lot of people died. A lot of Americans died unnecessarily.
Yeah, so Charlie Kirk is absolutely spot on there when he compares this to Iraq. And this is exactly what we are going to live through again, only worse. Now, like I said in the beginning, Donald Trump has declared victory here at least 7 times that we can count. But, like, even George Bush had the balls to go over there and physically stand on an aircraft carrier in the Gulf with his little mission accomplished banner. The United States at this point is in no position for Donald Trump to put himself at risk and do that little photo op in the Middle East. It's not going to happen because right now, unfortunately, you have Iranian missiles that are pretty much touching every American target you could imagine in the Middle East. And yeah, they're getting decimated, to be sure. They're slowing down. But this thing ain't over, folks. The fat lady has not sung yet. So, now Richard over here asked, why don't you comment on the third world country that Canada has now become? I think that's a fantastic idea. Let's do that. So I want to pivot over to Mark Carney's response to this. But first, I have to address his other point here. Canadians have the luxury of being weak. Dude, are you an American? I'm assuming so. But if so, you might not be aware of this. So let's pop this back on the screen here. Get me some volume.
Canadian Armed Forces members were attacked on March the 1st.
So to set up this clip here, this is a post from Table Salt. Breaking. Canadian soldiers were attacked in Kuwait on March 1st, but Mark Carney never told Canadians. Now, this really isn't breaking news because this broke a couple of days ago, but even then, this was from way back at the start of March. Now, the Canadian government didn't think it was in anybody's interest to tell us that, Canadian troops were in harm's way and that they were actually attacked. This is crazy, man. Listen to this.
Canadian Armed Forces members were attacked on March the 1st in Kuwait during the very early hours of the first parts of the war in Iran. We are extremely, well, first and foremost, we're happy to know that everyone is safe. We've heard that at committee as well, that we were assured that everyone in the Canadian Armed Forces have been safe throughout the region. However, Prime Minister Carney has had multiple occasions and press availability to disclose this fact that Canadian Armed Forces bases in Kuwait were attacked on March the 1st. We also are very concerned that this has been an ongoing lack of transparency, and it's part of the ongoing flip-flops of Mark Carney and the Liberals on their position on the war in Iran. As Conservatives, we are very supportive of the removal of the terrorist regime in Iran and for freedom and democracy to prevail throughout the country. However, I have to remind everyone that when we were government during the Harper era, Conservatives held ongoing press availability and technical briefings on our Canadian Armed Forces and Operation Impact in Iraq and Syria. This is a failure of the government of not wanting to communicate, not being transparent, and not sharing with Canadians exactly how Canada is impacted by this war and how the Canadian Armed Forces are continuing to be in the region, not involved in this operation, but continuing on in their responsibilities tied to other operations in Canadian interest. So we ask the government to be transparent, to provide all the details and information, rather than us learning about it 10 days, 11 days after the fact, since this is something that is important to Canadians and the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you.
All right. So I think that's a pretty reasonable ask, right? I think that the Canadian public should be informed if our soldiers are attacked in this way in Kuwait. Now, Mark Carney is really ruling this place like a CEO. He doesn't act like a duly elected politician, and he's just so arrogant and pompous, man. So I want to switch gears here and share something else Mark Carney Iran related. Just bear with me again here. We got to pull it up. All right, here we go. After Trump begged Canada to come to his aid in the Strait of Hormuz, Mark Carney announces that Canada will not assist the United States in any of its operations against Iran. Now, this is quite the flip-flop from Mark Carney, because a few days ago, well, rather, probably about 5 days ago now, he said that he implied that Canadian troops could actually get involved in this conflict. Now, maybe he meant that they already have, and we just haven't been told, obviously, because obviously we saw that last clip. But here he is in the House of Commons saying that we will not get involved.
Canada is not participating in the offensive operations of Israel and the United States and will not. Canada is not participating in the offensive.
So there it is. Now, you would think I would be happy about this, right? Because, like, that is sort of the position that I want us to take. But the trouble is Mark Carney isn't doing this out of any sort of, like, principled stance. It's not because he understands that these regime change wars are bad. They're not in the interest of the Canadian people. But the man has no spine. He doesn't appear to really know what he's doing. The fact that he would make all of these contradictory statements, like, within a week, at first he came out in full support of it. And then he said he supported it with regret. And then he said Canadian troops might end up going. And now he says this. It's really hard to make heads or tails of his position. Now, Mark Carney is not making a principled position here because Canada, we don't have any foreign policy of our own, essentially. We are really just an arm of the United Nations or the World Economic Forum. Whatever the European Union wants to do, Canada does. Now, I draw comparisons to the the war in Iraq, because I really do feel like history is repeating right before our very eyes. We're watching it happen again. And a lot of people like to claim that Canada made a principled stand by not going to Iraq in 2003, which we were correct to do, by the way, because honestly, nobody now in this day and age looks back and says that the Iraq war was a good idea, right? Doesn't matter if you're left, right, Democrat, Republican, whatever. I think we can all agree that the entire thing was an unmitigated disaster. But Canada didn't make a principled stand because we knew George Bush was lying. No. Jean Chrétien refused to go to Iraq simply because the United States refused to go to Iraq. And Harper was pushing for it really hard at the time. And everyone was congratulating Jean Chrétien for making this big stand. But really, he never really came out strongly against the war either. He just, with his tail between his legs, said, well, the United Nations said no, so I'm saying no. Canada doesn't have a foreign policy of its own. It really doesn't. And that's something that really needs to change. But to Richard's point, I don't think he's still here, but he said, Canadians have the luxury of being weak and childish. You live under the umbrella of the American military, right? But it didn't used to be this way. It didn't used to be this way at all. This country has been gutted from the inside out systematically over the last 30 to 40 years, but it really accelerated in the last 10. Now, that's all I have to say about the Iran war for now. So I want to switch gears here, and I want to talk about this fiasco that was Travis Dhanraj's testimony this week. This was crazy, man. So the story is a CBC reporter, a former CBC reporter named Travis Dhanraj. He had his own show on CBC, but he's made some pretty strong allegations against our state-funded corporate media here in Canada. So let's take a look at this here, shall we? I apologize. I just have to queue it up. Actually, in the background here, I had a little bit of a browser crash, and now I have to find my sources again, which kind of sucks, but bear with me here. We'll get there. Oh, in the meantime, though, while I sort that out, this one's quite funny. So this one's from Juno News. Breaking. If this attack happened in Kuwait on March 1st, why didn't you inform Canadians before? Prime Minister Carney. Well, I'm not the only spokesperson for the government, but I'll confirm. Man, this is nuts. Listen to this guy bumble through this question.
If you can confirm in English if this attack happened, and why you didn't inform Canadian before?
Well, I mean, I'm not the only spokesperson for the government, but I'll just confirm that Canadian forces are, the members of the Canadian forces are all safe and sound. I reinforce, as I said in French, what you know, which is that we are not engaged in these actions of the U.S. and Israel. We're not engaged in offensive actions, and we will not be engaged in those actions.
If you can confirm in English if this attack.
Okay, so that's absolutely insane. He doesn't think that Canadians deserve any sort of accountability here. Like, it blows my mind. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Give me the truth. 883 in the chat says, exactly. Now, if there's any Americans that are watching this, and you might be confused why I'm pivoting to Canadian politics, well, there's the Canadian flag in the background there. But yeah, so if you've never paid any attention to our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, this isn't unusual, okay? This might be like a couple more ahs than we're used to hearing, maybe like 2 or 3, but this is how he speaks all of the time. And yeah, exactly. Give me the truth. All right, so I want to switch gears here, and I want to talk about Travis Dhanraj, because this is one that I wanted to get to this week, but I never really got there. I've covered it in the past when he actually made these announcements and left his job, but he actually testified at a hearing about this issue. So I want to go ahead and just pull this one up here. There we go.
There we go. Appreciate it. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. As a kid growing up in Alberta, I wasn't like most of my friends. Every night, I watched The National with Knowlton Nash. He represented a public broadcaster that belonged to Canadians. Not to power, not to party, but to the public. And that is the CBC that I believed in. Now, many Canadians know the story about one of my tweets. In April 2024, I publicly stated that Canada Tonight had requested an interview with then CBC President Catherine Tate, and the request was declined. Facts. Shortly after, I was removed from the air. Now, on May 7th, 2024, Tate told this very committee she was, quote, not aware of any repercussions. Yet 24 hours earlier, ATIP records show her vice president, Barb Williams, briefed her directly about my situation. Now that matters because trust matters. The tweet was not the beginning. It was the breaking point. For months prior, tensions had been building, not over performance, but over control. While I was publicly held up as a bold, diverse host, my ability to lead the very program carrying my face and name was quietly being stripped away. CBC's stated commitment to diversity contrasted with realities of tokenism. Still, I pushed forward, creating a nightly panel to showcase real diversity, including of thought. I questioned unequal pay. Why, for example, one contributor who was Indigenous always needed to be paid, while others weren't. When a prominent Black journalist requested compensation after appearing doing the exact same job, I was told to reconsider booking him moving forward. I attempted to end this discriminatory practice. Instead, the panel was canceled. When it came to politics, interviews were blocked under guardrails, governed by an internal document never made public, titled Parameters for Political Guests. Political access was centralized, booking decisions controlled elsewhere. It did not happen once. It became a pattern. It became the standard. Power in Politics, hosted by David Cochrane, was given gatekeeping authority over which politicians could appear on Canada Tonight. When I questioned that control and who was in control, I was viewed as disruptive. Now, at the same time, I raised concerns about a toxic environment. After I sat down with Speaker Greg Fergus for a conversation on Black History Month, Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton circulated internal communications questioning my program, copying senior leadership, insinuating she or Mr. Cochrane should have done the interview. It was an intimidation tactic, which management ignored. I and others raised concerns about bullying behavior by senior figures, including Mr. Cochrane. But while he remained on air, I faced discipline and marginalization. Now, the transcripts of these meetings show the issue was not about my journalism, but about reputational risk to the corporation. I received a written warning carrying the threat of termination. I was placed under confidentiality restrictions that prevented me from correcting public and internal narratives. CBC silenced and intimidated me simply for trying to do my job and fulfill my public service role to Canadians. Now, this is not about left or right. It's not about one tweet or one career. It's about systemic control, tokenism, selective enforcement, and a toxic culture where intimidation went unchecked.
Now, this, I think, is the most important part about his testimony. So, like, on some level, none of the stuff that he brought up about, you know, the bias against conservatives, the lack of diversity in thought, none of that is a surprise to anybody who knows what's going on with the CBC, right? We all see it. We can see their inherent bias. That's not news. Don't get me wrong. It's huge that a former CBC reporter is coming out to say all this stuff. Like, that's awesome. That's great. Like, we need to hear this, but it's nothing that we didn't know. However, the most interesting part about this for me is how he exposes that, you know, you had tokenism, you had marginalization, stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, all of these things that the CBC claim to believe in, all that woke stuff at the top level, you know, he's exposing their toxic environment. So they don't actually believe this stuff. They're just pushing it on Canadians. It's unbelievable. And hold on, Give Me the Truth here says, anybody paying attention does not trust MSM. It's all noise while they turn Canada into a totalitarian state, socialist shithole, and many Canadians are falling for the nonsense. Amen, Give Me the Truth. You hit the nail on the head there, dude. Now, I want to finish up this clip here.
When I refused to waive my rights under the Canadian Human Rights Act in a proposed confidentiality agreement right here, and a gag order, essentially, my role was not renewed. My union, tasked with protecting my rights as an employee, told me explicitly, quote, "It's very much a normal thing that we use." After 25 years in journalism, my career ended. That dream I had as a kid of working at CBC shattered along with my trust in it. Now, inside the newsroom, the message was unmistakable and did not need to be spoken. I raised concerns. I challenged centralized control and bias. I fought for real diversity and equal standards. I tried to do my job as a journalist. Within months, I was pulled off the air, disciplined, restricted from speaking, stripped of my primetime program, and eventually out altogether. Now, if you were still working there, would you feel safe raising similar concerns? This is how silence becomes culture. It's how whistleblowers are intimidated. Public institutions do not weaken from scrutiny. They weaken when they avoid it. The CBC that I believed in was strong enough to withstand accountability. If it is to endure as a public broadcaster worthy of Canadians' trust and over $1.4 billion of their money, it must be strong enough to withstand it again. Accountability is not destruction, it is survival. Thank you for your time.
All right, sorry about that. Gimme the Truth says CBC is just another arm of the Liberal Party. You're absolutely right. We all know this to be true. And you also say you're on mute. Thank you very much, man. Like I said, I usually always record my videos beforehand, but the news has just been so crazy lately that I've, I'll go to research one topic and then I sit down to record and all of a sudden something else is blowing up. Now, you do say no sound, bud, but I did turn my microphone back on, so hopefully we're okay. Now, I know there is a little bit of a delay in the chat here. I certainly hope my sound is on. Back on now, thanks. Yeah, there is a delay in the chat. So he mentioned David Cochrane, and I was on mute there when I brought up this picture. But I'm replying to your point here that says CBC is just another arm of the Liberal Party. Yeah, we all know this to be true. He referenced David Cochrane here, and there's David Cochrane's facial expression the moment that it came down that Pierre Poilievre won the by-election in Battle River Crowfoot. Now, this photo went viral back when they had that by-election. Look at his eyes, man. These people are completely captured by the Liberal Party. And it makes sense that they would be. Right? I mean, that's where they get their funding. Mark Carney openly campaigned on increasing funding to the CBC to the tune of, if I remember correctly, I think it was well over $30 million. He was going to give them an increase, which, by the way, he has completely went back on. The CBC is actually going to be losing funding. Good, because the Liberals always get their best ideas from the Conservatives. It's almost become a meme at this point. But I want to swing back to Travis Dhanraj here for a second, because, he mentioned a lot of the internal stuff that happened at CBC, but this is an older clip. This is from March of 2022. And this is why they can't have real journalists at the CBC. Gimme the Truth says the libs pay them off 100%. But they can't have this kind of journalism at the CBC. They just can't. Now, I didn't even know who this guy was before, it came down. It was earlier this year that he resigned and he made that public statement. I covered it in an earlier episode of the show many, many months ago now. But Travis Dhanraj says Deputy PM Chrystia Freeland and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly clearly did not like my question. Why is Justin Trudeau in Europe on the taxpayer dime while there are pressing domestic issues he could be dealing with at home? Here's the exchange. And this, by the way, dovetails in with why I have a problem with these regime change wars, whether it be, you know, the war in Iraq, Iran, Libya, everything that happened with Syria under the Democrats. It doesn't seem to matter. The Democrats and Republicans, they all just seem to be a uniparty. You have Hillary Clinton openly saying she's optimistic about Donald Trump's second term. But I digress. This is the clip that, in my opinion, is the beginning of the end for Travis Dhanraj. This was way back in 2022. Let's listen.
A lot of Canadians are back at home kind of wondering and watching this trip and seeing a lot of photo ops, a lot of broad platitudes, and not many specifics when it comes to details. Why couldn't these meetings been done from Canada? Why does the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Defence Minister need to be in Europe right now when there are a lot of domestic issues at home that are very important? And some people view this as a photo op trip to Europe.
Well, the only person I've heard saying that is you. But
there are many people that are saying that.
But let me just say that this is a really, really important trip for the Prime Minister and for Canada. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is the most important geopolitical issue in the world right now. And the fact that the Prime Minister has been able this week to have direct conversations with our leading partners around the world is absolutely essential. It is his responsibility and his duty at this critical moment to be here having those direct conversations, particularly because Canada and the Prime Minister himself has a very close relationship with Ukraine. We have a very good understanding of what the Ukrainians need, and having the Prime Minister able to have those conversations makes a big difference. And I will point out, these are very sensitive security issues, and it's hard to have these conversations even over secure lines. So it makes a big difference to have these conversations and to have these meetings. I would say that you could judge us as a government to be derelict in our duty to Canadians and the world were we not rolling up our sleeves and being involved in these direct, very substantive conversations.
If I can add, dealing with millions of people fleeing Ukraine throughout Europe, being dispersed, and thousands of lives at stake, millions of lives at stake is not platitude. And I don't think Canadians.
I mean, the American president is doing it from the White House.
My colleague Blinken and Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris is in Poland tomorrow.
Just to say, I reject your question.
Yeah.
And not only that, I would say that Canadians expect us to be here, and that's exactly why we're here.
I will be having supper tonight with the German finance minister. That is an important relationship and an important conversation for me in understanding what the economic impacts of this war are as we finalize our budget.
Oh, here we go. Not going to get muted again. So you can really see it there. You can really see how Joly, Freeland, and the other guy there, they're just staring Travis Dhanraj down. And how they arrogantly said, I reject your question. They probably couldn't believe that that was a CBC journalist. And so, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but I believe that might have been a watershed moment in Travis Dhanraj's career. And let's check in with the chat here. We have some things here. So, Give Me the Truth says, all the politicians in the U.S. are bought by the big beaks. I assume you mean big banks or... Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see what... we're getting a little spicy. Yeah, they definitely are bought by the big banks. That is absolutely true. Epstein was just used to get dirt on all of them. Blackmail works. It's funny you say that, man, because I had something else here that I'm really glad you reminded me of, because I wanted to get to this when I was talking about Iran earlier, but this is really funny.
War in Iran ends.
Hold on. Got to get my screen share back here. Yeah, there it is. So this is a post from Mr. Sunshine Baby. This Canadian premier just accused Donald Trump of starting the Iran war to cover up the Epstein files. All right. So I want to get into this because, so this is obviously the premier of Manitoba, Wab Kinew. Now, I'm not a big fan of the NDP, like at all. Normally, I wouldn't agree with anything this man says, but oh boy, is he ever on fire here. Mr. Sunshine Baby says this Canadian premier just accused Donald Trump of starting the Iran war to cover up the Epstein files. We are not in Kansas anymore, man. Let's take a look.
I hope this war in Iran ends. These gas prices are too high and kids are being killed for no reason. Even the Trump administration cannot explain why they're at war in Iran right now. And I mean, like, the Epstein file seems to be as good of a reason as anyone else can figure out. So stop the war. So we're going to keep an eye on it. We're always going to be there to help you. We cut the gas tax once. We brought it down permanently afterwards. So we're going to be there to help with the cost of living. But right now, Donald Trump is public enemy number one when it comes to our economy and the average person keeping your head above water. So, yeah, that's my hope, is that the war stops.
Okay, so at the risk of being accused of having Trump derangement syndrome, yeah, everything the Trump administration is doing sucks for Canada. And, you know, I think if we're being honest, we should be able to acknowledge that. However, I would push back on his claim and say that maybe Donald Trump is public enemy number 2 when it comes to Canada, because public enemy number 1, in my opinion, is the political establishment in this country that has completely decimated our ability to be self-sufficient and be masters of our own house, as Mark Carney likes to say. Because honestly, with the resources we have, the people that we have, the natural resources, the oil, we shouldn't be in the position that we are in today. And man, for Wab to just come out and say this is absolutely wild. And it's really interesting because Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre essentially have almost the same position on Iran, right? I mean, Mark Carney originally had the conservative position, but then when he realized how truly unpopular it was, he's walking it back. And that shows Mark Carney has no spine. But the NDP is coming out and opposing this war, right? And you also have the PPC, which honestly does a better job representing conservative values than the Conservative Party itself, although they're more like libertarian. They are also against this war for the right reasons. Now, this is when horseshoe theory becomes real. Because, like, in the center, you have one position, and then the more extreme you get on either side, you end up at the same place, right? So I thought that was fascinating how Wab came out and said this. He said it out loud. You know, Donald Trump is attacking Iran because he's afraid of the Epstein files. But I don't know, man. I think it's I think he might have that backwards. I think the reason he's attacking Iran is because of what's in the Epstein files. Wab sort of got it backwards there. They don't have to distract from the Epstein files. It's out there. The sad reality is that people that support Donald Trump don't care. And I'm not even alleging that there's anything in the Epstein files that's legitimate that implicates Donald Trump himself. But what the administration has done in covering this up, making excuses for it, and just being really weird about the whole thing in general doesn't inspire confidence. I don't want to get into it too much because I covered it in a previous video, but Howard Lutnick, for instance, is I made a video about that a few weeks ago. If you're interested, you can go back and check that out. But yeah, Gimme the Truth says we're all in it. They are all in it together while we pay the bill. Absolutely. Spot on, dude. Now, the last thing I wanted to get into tonight was I want to talk about Mark Carney getting a majority, because that is going to be coming down real soon, whether we like it or not. And apparently a lot of Canada likes it. You know, they like the fact that we don't have a functioning democracy in this country half of the time. I mean, MPs cross the floor all the time, right? Not all of the time, but it's happened quite a few times throughout Canadian history. But like once, okay. Twice, that's a little weird. 3 times, something's not right here. And 4 times, you know, I just don't buy it that Conservatives and now somebody from the NDP all of a sudden are just abandoning their principles to join the Liberal Party. Now, the latest one to cross the floor was this Lori Idlout from Nunavut. And I just want to pull this up here real quick. I got to get better at figuring out Rumble Studio. But hey, if I like it, I might pay to get the watermark up there removed. So we'll see. But hold on. Let me see what we got here. Let's remove that. Click on something else. There we go. All right, so the real Mr. Bench on X says, Lori Idlout said her decision to cross the floor was, quote, complicated. Separately, her son, Robin Idlout, was charged in December 2024 following a child blah, blah, blah investigation led by Nunavut RCMP and Winnipeg Police. That's right. He had PDF files on his computer. His first court appearance was January 13th, 2025 in Winnipeg. Since then, there have been no clear public updates on the status of the case. Why? Now, that's real, guys. That's something that happened. Now, Lori refused to say what she was offered, only saying it was complicated.
Like with any complicated issue, it wasn't just one thing that happened. There are a variety of many things that have allowed me to really reflect on this, and I'm very thankful to be so warmly welcomed. Like with any
Yeah, so she was warmly welcomed to the Liberal Party. Now, we've had Michael Maw cross the floor. We've had Chris D'Entremont, and now her. And Matt Genereux, of course. So 3 Conservatives and 1 NDP. Now, I simply don't believe that this is organic. I just don't. Now, there's one more thing here to this floor crossing story here. Let me see if I can find it. Again, sorry guys, I had a browser crash midstream there, and all of the things that I had queued up are gone. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, here we go. Mark Carney. I'm honored to welcome Nunavut Member of Parliament Lori Idlout to the team as the newest member of our Liberal caucus. Working in partnership to build a strong North and a strong Nunavut is essential to building a more secure, prosperous, and resilient Canada with lasting economic opportunity for blah, blah, blah people all across the North. So I don't want to actually read all of Mark Carney's AI-written word salad. Not interested in that. So there she is, hanging out with the Prime Minister. And these replies on X, Mark Carney's getting ratioed horribly on this. What is the current cost of integrity? Is it rising, or is betraying voters simply getting cheaper these days? Just wondering. This is not what Canadians voted for. Your disregard for democracy is appalling. The Canadian electorate asked for a minority government 3 times now to keep it in check. Carney is poaching to take control. There's no honor in floor crossing. Backroom deals are for cowards. Can't win a majority with an election, so you steal it. Lori is a traitor. You are despicable. No respect for democracy. So much for values, eh? And yeah, here it is. This is what I was looking for. This is the release from the Winnipeg Police. Oh no, sorry. This is a summary of her son here and his crimes. Robin Idlout, the son of NDP MP Lori Idlout, appeared in court January 2025. He made his next court appearance in Winnipeg, Manitoba, following his December 4th arrest. He was charged with possession of child, blah, 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 and accessing child, blah, 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 blah. The charges stemmed from a joint investigation by the Nunavut RCMP Specialized Investigative Team and the Winnipeg Police Service Internet Child Exploitation Unit. Now, it's interesting because he was released from custody after the initial appearance and is scheduled for further court proceedings. Now, these are just allegations. This is just speculation on my part, but I have to wonder. You know what I mean? Like, this timing is just, I don't believe in this many coincidences. And I know this is Canada, and unfortunately, a lot of these crimes do get given slaps on the wrist. It's disgusting. So this might not be out of the ordinary. But if I were to make a bet, I would bet a large sum of our devalued currency that this Robin Idlout will not see a day behind bars. That's it. That's all it is. Now I'm about an hour and 5 into this, so I think I'm going to call it a night because it is after midnight here on the East Coast. But thank you to the few people who have tuned in and anybody who happens to be catching this on the replay. Yeah, I got to get a little bit better at doing this live. I do make a lot of videos that I make ahead of time and then release on one topic, but I want to start doing this every single Sunday night. I think it's fun to sit down and just riff with the few people that are in the chat. And again, the nice thing about having a small audience is, you know, as long as, you know, the numbers aren't crazy, I can pretty much get to every comment. And my goal obviously is to grow the channel to the point where I need mods and whatnot, and I couldn't possibly read every single comment. That would be fun. But no, for the meantime, I'm digging this setup. So thank you to the few who have tuned in. Subscribe to the main channel on YouTube is where I actually focus most of my energy. But I got to say, Rumble Studio is pretty cool. Normally I use OBS to do these things, but Rumble has quite the streamlined little process here. So it's kind of neat. Hence the watermark there. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Don't forget, smash the like button, share the videos out, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. And yeah,